things that we do differently, and it doesn't necessarily sit well with people's sentimentalities in 2024. We are very, very strict, and we have corridors that are more or less silent. We say good afternoon, good morning, but that's it. We walk in single file very quickly to our lessons. Children would never turn around unless to talk to somebody else. They work very hard. We give them lots of homework. We expect a lot of them. And of course, that then does mean that they deliver on the results in terms of their GCSEs and their A-levels. But we also teach them some very traditional values. And sometimes people don't like the values that we teach them. So personal responsibility, for instance, that they're responsible for themselves. In 2024, there's much more of a sort of victimhood culture outside of our walls, where people will say, well, the child is poor, or the child is black, or the child is struggling at home for whatever reason. Therefore, it would be wrong to hold him to account for doing his homework. Whereas we always say, no, it doesn't matter whatever's happening at home. You need to get your homework into school. Those kinds of, there are excuses that are made all the time, saying that life is particularly difficult for a child for reasons outside of their control. And then standards are lowered, I feel, and we don't do that. We insist that our children work hard. Whoever they are, whatever their background is, they all need to produce the same standard of work.
So talking about standards, are you concerned that Labour have scrapped the Ofsted one-word judgment? Do you think that will reduce the accountability of schools, or is that a good move?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's my position on Ofsted is complicated. I think that Ofsted is not necessarily a force for good with those judgments. I do think that Ofsted can be very distracting for schools, and they end up simply doing what they think Ofsted wants, which is the wrong thing to do for your school. It means that you end up being obsessed with bureaucracy as opposed to being out on the ground doing the right things for the kids. So in theory, I'm for abandoning Ofsted judgments, but I think that needs to be done in a culture of transparency. So at Michaela, for instance, we invite anyone to come and visit us. You just go on the website, you sign up, and you can come and have a tour and see the school. In most schools, it's impossible to visit. And I think sunlight is the best disinfectant. And, it's easy to know what orange juice you want when you go to the shop, because you can taste the pulp and you can taste the no pulp. If you're unable to really get into a school and see it at work, then how is your choice in choosing schools valid? How does that? You don't really have choice if you don't know what you're choosing. So I think it's fine not to have Ofsted judgments as long as you have transparency, and government should be doing both at the same time. They ought to be encouraging a system of transparency where all schools are more or less forced to open to the public. And I don't see that happening. So that's where the concern comes, because then, well, I don't know. What are schools up to? We don't know. Mm.
And whether or not Ofsted is the right vehicle for driving change, of course, there have been some successes in school standards over the last few years. And some people are worried that that's going to change under Labour. Are you optimistic about the new government, or are you concerned about their approach to education? I'm thinking particularly about the curriculum review that's being led by someone who isn't an expert in maths or science or English, but in gender studies, for example.
Yeah, so that's a concern. I'm also reading that they're wanting to bring back modular courses and coursework. Thank goodness we abandoned coursework years ago under Michael Gove. He made the right decision with that, because it just gives middle-class children the opportunity to get their parents to help them with their coursework and to get the top grades. And the children who come from less privileged backgrounds are at a great disadvantage when it comes to coursework. So it's just absolutely maddening, the idea that we would want to reintroduce that ability for middle-class children to rig it so that they will definitely get the better results, not because they're working so hard, but their parents are able to work quite hard with them. Or tutors, for instance, would be able to help them with that. And it does just rig their GCSE results.
Yes.
So it's not a true reflection of the ability and the hard work of the child. So that worries me. It worries me that they introduced this change on Ofsted because it makes teachers feel bad. It makes leaders feel bad. One should never have policy based on the way in which we feel. What are the facts? What's the reality? Is this going to be a good thing for schools or a bad thing for schools? Leaders, we're paid more than the teachers for a reason. We need to carry that responsibility. Now, it may not be the right thing to do, giving judgments, because it doesn't actually help schools. That's a different point. But the fact that they did it because they're worried about our feelings, well, I don't want them to be worried about my feelings. I want them to be worried about standards. And I want them to enable a system which is able to support us head teachers in delivering the very best education for our children.
And one final question, if I may. Obviously, teachers receive a lot of criticism, but you've been quite critical of parenting sometimes as well. What one thing could parents do to improve their children's chances in education?
Yeah, well, not give them a smartphone. They should not give them a smartphone until after 16. They are the most dangerous things on the planet. Parents don't realize. They make nice babysitters, and let's face it, that's why we all do it. We give them a smartphone because it keeps them busy. But you have no idea who has access to your child, everyone from a gang member to a pedophile, putting your child in danger. But then there's also the business of the smartphone breaking their brains. They're not going to read very much. Yeah. They'll get to a point where they don't read at all. A book is black and white and flat. A smartphone has all sorts of colors and pop-ups and games and all kinds of things. And the child will just not really be interested in reading. And then you'll say, oh, well, actually, he was never interested in reading. No, you did that to him. So it really is, I strongly say to parents, do not give them a smartphone. They'll get the best possible, if you don't, they'll get the best possible GCSEs. They'll know how to organize their time. They won't be addicted.
Katharine, thank you so much. We're going to have to leave it there.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Katharine Birbalsingh there, very controversial but highly successful head teacher. And sticking with the theme of transparency in schools, I'm now joined by Claire Page, someone who's been fighting on the front line for transparency in schools. Thank you so much for joining me, Claire. You're a mother from London. Tell me your story.
Yes, well, it began in 2021, so quite a while ago now, when my eldest daughter had a sex education lesson. And I was told in advance that the lesson would be about consent, which I thought was a good subject, and I had the right to withdraw her from that, but chose to let her go. And when she returned, she communicated that actually this lesson was about quite a lot besides. So she'd been told about heteronormativity and that this was a bad thing. We lived in a heteronormative world that we needed to change. And she'd also been told that she should be sex positive in her attitude to relationships. I thought this was controversial, actually. And so I looked up the provider when after the lesson, and I kind of found things on the website that really concerned me. There were lesson plans that asked children to engage in sexual dialogue, and there were also links that went on to what I can only describe really as adult sexually explicit material. I felt that was inappropriate, so I asked to see the lesson plan, which I think a lot of parents might do. And the school said they were unable to give that to me, and talked about copyright control and commercial secrecy or these ideas. And so I made a freedom of information request, which I thought, this is a state-funded school. Surely they will need to provide me this information. And the school declined. So I went to the Information Commissioner and, made an appeal against that decision. And he sided with the school and the RSE company, which I was really surprised about. And so then I appealed in court at the first tier tribunal, and I lost that case. So at that point, I think this became something of a national issue, really. Yeah. Parents noticed, and I think so many people felt that parents should be able to see and have a copy of what their kids are taught. And so I'm still appealing that in the upper tribunal.
OK, a shocking story. Now, I should say that GB News has been in contact with the provider concerned, and they claim that they have been targeted and threatened. They claim their work is potentially life-saving. They deny all allegations of inappropriate presentations, that they've adhered with relevant legislation. They're evidence-based, and they say they've never refused parents access to their content. But nevertheless, it's a live issue. Should parents have access to their children's education lessons?
They certainly should. And to slightly disagree there, I do not have a copy of this lesson and I don't possess it. And so I don't have access to that material. And that's really why I'm in court. So absolutely, parents need to be able to have a copy.
I think our viewers will be shocked that anybody could claim that something that the taxpayer is paying for, so some materials used in school, children bring home maths textbook. If a children can bring home a maths textbook, why can't they bring home sex education lessons? Yes,
it's a good question. I mean, the way that the ICO has put it is that, and the way that the School of Sexuality Education, who has said they want to keep their material sort of secret, if you like, is that it's a commercial secret and it needs to protect their commercial interests. And that if some other competitor sees this work, then, you know, that they will lose income. But I think something else is going on with RSE, really. For me, I think that very controversial issues are being discussed. I think the RSE industry knows that parents are, some parents disagree with that and will push against it. So I think they're actually using commercial secrecy and interests as an excuse for actually keeping this at arm's length from parents.
Now, earlier this year, the previous Secretary of State under a Conservative government did write to schools saying that they should share materials and they shouldn't be bound by any contracts that prevent them. So why did you then not win the case? And are you expecting to have a different result next time?
Yes. Well, there's a slight difference between being able to see and being able to possess a copy. And I think that's the difference. So we haven't really got to the point where anyone in politics has said parents should be able to possess a copy.
I see.
Now, it's really important to actually have a copy. First of all, you can scrutinise it, but secondly, you can act on what you see. So I can make a formal complaint to my governors. I can go to Ofsted or education authorities and say I'm concerned. And it's really essential for safeguarding. What actually has been proposed as a sort of compromise is perhaps a parent can go in and have a look on the premises and then come away. Well, they've got no proof of what they've seen. They can't show, they can't discuss, can't have that open dialogue.
That isn't transparency.
Yeah, it's not. And
And finally, this must have taken its toll on you. Why did you decide to go public and has it been really tough?
It has been tough. I've taken some flack. But for me, it's a matter of principle. I think the primacy of the family needs looking after. I think anything that children are taught, you know, parents should have the similar kind of access that teachers have. They should be able to look at the copies. And I also think there's, you know, there's a lot of politicisation going on in schools at the moment. And we've got a really great piece of law, Section 406, 407 in the Education Act, which says kids can't be indoctrinated in school. And in order for us to help that be enforced, make our complaints as we need to and point out problems, we have to have a copy and say, you know, this is not impartial education. So that's about protecting democracy, actually.
Amazing. Claire, you've been incredibly brave and I'm sure our viewers will very much appreciate. In fact, polling shows that the vast majority of parents do think that schools should be completely transparent about what their children are learning. So thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate your time.